وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So the surah we're going to look at is Sura Al Qamar, and this is basically also the surah we're using as a focus for the month of Ramadan. Basically a Makki surah, 55 ayat. If you look at Quran City, we've actually placed it at the top, basically because 4 times Allah says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. And if I paraphrase it, he's basically saying, is there anyone who will put in even a little bit of effort in the Quran so he may be able to understand it, or whom he may be able to take it as a reminder? And when we come to that, we'll talk about it. In essence, Qamar is the moon. We've divided it into 8 sections, and that's what you need to keep in mind at the moment. The focus is basically on internalizing the message of the Quran with a little bit of effort. But if I can go a little bit further, it's actually telling you and me, it's warning. It's a sort of warning. And that internalizing the message is basically internalizing the warning. And the warning is basically to the fact that if you do not follow divine guidance, and if you do not agree, or you do not think of accountability, or you do not believe in accountability, then you have an issue. And all the historical examples we have here are of people who rebelled against divine guidance and didn't believe in accountability. The Makkans believed in a God. They believed in a creator, but they did not believe in accountability, and that was their downfall. Again, as I mentioned before, 4 times the verse is repeated, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ, and I will emphasize or talk about that more a little bit later. Benefits of recitation: it's ease of difficulties. Respect of people if you keep it during Jumu'ah Salah. Basically, respect of people when you recite it. And understand why, because it changes your perspective of life. So we're going to start with section 1, which is sort of in essence a focus on the miracle of the splitting of the moon. So if you think of section 1, you're thinking of a miracle of the splitting of the moon, but despite that, you find that they followed their whims. Anyway, let's go to that first, and then we'll look at all the other sections at the end. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. اقترب, when something comes near. قريب, as you probably know. So the hour draws near. Accountability comes near and near and near as one's life progresses. وَانشَقَّ الْقَمَرِ. Now you know inshiqaq is a surah. So the moon was split. So this was something where they said, we will only believe you if you bring us a miracle. And he pointed to the moon, and on either side of Mount Hira there were the 2 halves, and they came together again. As I understand it, and maybe you can Google it and find out, there is a crack in the moon. So they're told, bear witness, you can actually see this. But then he says, وَإِن يَرَوْا, and if they see ayatan, a sign of Allah, يُعْرِضُوا عَرَضًا, they will turn aside. وَيَقُولُوا, and they will say, سِحْرٌ مُسْتَمِرٌ, this is magic. Mustamir is continuing. In other words, if you continually brought them signs, they will continually say it's magic. It's like they cannot see it as a sign of Allah. وَكَذَّبُوا, they lied, they belied it. وَاتَّبَعُوا أَهْوَاءَهُمْ, they followed their own thoughts, their whims. وَكُلُّ أَمْرٍ مُسْتَقِرٍ, in every single affair, mustaqir, it will be settled. In other words, their time will come. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ, and certainly has come to them, مِنَ الْأَنْبَاءِ, news, مَا فِيهِ, from revelation, from this, that means from the Quran, مُزْدَجَرٍ. Now, مُزْدَجَرٍ is, it tells you off. So, you need to be told off. There's goodness in being told off to be able to understand some things. Hikmatum baligha, there is wisdom that is far-reaching. Baligha is far-reaching. فَمَا تُغْنِ النُّذُرِ, but it does not benefit them, this warning. Warnings are really good, and the only person who's going to warn you are those who are close to you. Moms are the biggest fans of warnings. They're the biggest fans of telling you off, because they care immensely. فَتَوَلَّى عَنْهُمْ, So Allah is saying, turn away. Yawma yad'u da'i, on the day when the caller will call them. This is talking about the trumpet of the day of judgment. Ila shay'in nukur, on a day which is, nukur is unknown or disliked, on a day which is very, very difficult. Again, this is talking about the day of Qiyam. Khusha an absaruhum. Now, their eyes, I am going to try and say what khushan. Khushan is like, it's filled with horror. They're absolutely exhausted. Their eyes will be exhausted. يَخْرُجُونَ مِنَ الْأَجْدَاثِ, they will come out from ajdath. Ajdath is graves that are unmarked. كَأَنَّهُمْ, like جَرَادٌ مُنْتَشِرٌ. Jarad is locusts. But locust muntashir means they'll be spread out like radio waves. So you can imagine people will be just, when there's an infestation of locusts, there is no direction. They go everywhere. Now look what he says. Where will they go? Muhti'ina ila da'i. Muhti'ina is in essence, hata'a is to run towards a target. So, you know, they will run towards something they think is a place where everybody's running to. Da'i is the caller. Yaqulul kafiruna, and the ones who covered up the truth will say, Hada yawmun asir. This is a very difficult day. So the first section, ayah 1 to 8, is looking at the miracle of the splitting of the moon. But it's also saying that whatever you bring them, they will not understand. They will make excuses about it. The only people who will understand anything are those who understand there is an akhirah, and there is a life beyond this, and there is accountability. Now the second section now gives historical examples of people. So the Makkans are now given these historical examples. The Prophet Nuh, in essence, was mocked. Now let's see what happens. كَذَّبَتْ قَبْلَهُمْ قَوْمَ نُوحٍ. Before them, the people of Nuh were rejected. فَكَذَّبُوا. They called him a liar. Abdana. They actually called our Abd a liar. Wakalu, and they says, Majnoon, he is mad. Not only do they call him Majnoon, was dojir. Remember the word? We did that before. That we said that the remembrance or the Quran had muzdajir. There was a scolding, but they scolded him. They told him off. They told him off for telling them to change their ways. فَدَعَا رَبَّهُ. So he got really upset, and he called his Rabb. And he said, Anni maghlubun, I am overcome, I am drowning. Fantasir. Now, it's not fansur, it's not help. Intasar is to seek revenge. So he's saying, Ya Allah, they are denying your signs. It's up to you. I'm telling you to avenge them. When you say avenge, it sounds a very difficult word. Give them the compensation of what they're doing. I've been talking to them for years, and I'll talk about Prophet Nuh in a minute. فَفَتَحْنَا. Now this is Allah's answer. What did he do? فَفَتَحْنَا. He opened. Fatah is to open. أَبْوَابَ السَّمَاءِ. Doors in the heavens. بِمَاءٍ. And water just came out. Munhamir. Munhamir means there's continuous pouring out of water. There was continuous rain. وَفَجَّرْنَا الْأَرْضَ. And then the earth sort of cracked open, uyunan, and springs came out. فَالْتَقَى الْمَاء. And فَالْتَقَى, the water from the heavens and the earth met. عَلَى أَمْرٍ قَدْ قُدِرٍ. And that was something that we'd already, that was our methodology or our compensation. It was a done deal. وَحَمَلْنَاهُ. But we boarded him. So we carried him. Ala dhatil, on something that had alwa and dusur. Alwa is like a flat plane. So he's saying on planks, and dusur is nails. Tajri bi'ayunina, and it was under our watchful eye, this ark that sailed. Jaza'an, this was a compensation. Liman kana kufir, for the one who was denied. For the one, in other words, who was mocked at, who people denied as our messenger. وَلَقَدْ تَرَكْنَاهَا. And we left this sign. We left this ark as a sign. فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Is there anyone who can put a little bit of effort in understanding, in remembering? I'd like to talk about the word muddakir because we'll see it not only 4 times in the ayah that I talked about, but 2 other times as well. So I'd like you to probably write this down or think about it. So the word that you and I know is dhikr. Dhikr is to remember. We say zakir, but it's actually dhakir. Dhakir is one who remembers or who reminds. Now, following on from that is a combination of the and ta, muzdakir. A muzdakir is someone who puts in a lot of effort in remembering. It reminds you of people who do exams. They put in a lot of effort. They're muzdakir. From there, take the ta out and put 2 thas. Muzdakir. A muzdakir is one who puts in a little bit less effort. We'll send this to you on the group, so you don't have to write it down. It's actually in the book that we're producing for Ramadan. And then from there is muddakir, easier to pronounce. Now in the Arabic language, when something is difficult to pronounce, it's difficult to do. When it's easy to pronounce, it's easy to do. So the level of difficulty of the language pronunciation of the words is a level of effort it takes in doing that. So muddakir means even a little bit of effort. So Allah is saying this whole story of Prophet Nuh, and sometimes we see it as, oh, I know the story of Prophet Nuh, and we don't see it put in the little bit of effort of trying to understand what was going on there, and I'll talk about it in a minute. And Allah says, فَكَيْفَ, how was my punishment and my warning? So he's asking the Quraysh, did you know about Nuh? How was it? How did you see it? And then he says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ. We have made this Qur'an easy to remember. فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Is there anyone who will put a little bit of effort into it? Now I'm going to talk about Prophet Nuh so we know. So his name Nuh, we all know Noha. Noha is a lamentation. So Nuh comes from somebody who lamented, who cried. And why did he cry? He cried because of the state of humanity, even after 950 years of preaching to them. Quran says this. I think it's Surah number 29, Ayah 14. He lived for 2,500 years. The average age at that time was 300 years. He was a carpenter by profession. But his mission was one God, Amr bil Ma'ruf, Nahi anil Munkar, and accountability. So he married 2 wives. His first wife was Amura, very, very faithful to him. The people of Nuh assumed that he wanted power, but he didn't. But that's what they assumed. And at first they scolded him. Then they started beating him up, so much so that he became unconscious. And this is when he raises his dua and says, Rabbi anni maghlubun fantasir. They're not angry at me, they're angry at the message I'm giving. So it's my message saying they're angry at you, so you take revenge. Now there's a story that maybe you will like. So Jibreel says, Allah has heard your dua. Here's 7 pits of dates, date seeds, plant them. And he planted them. And wait till they become date palms. And the answer will come. They became date palms. And they were told, eat of the dates, plant them again. So you have the 2nd season. Eat them again, 3rd season. Now that whittled out people who said, well, we thought after 1 season things will be okay. After the 3rd season, he was told, cut down the trees. Now remember, dates take a long time to grow. It was a long time. So the 3rd lot of dates, palms, were cut down, and he was told to build an ark. And he was built an ark in Kufa. There's no water there. He was laughed at. He was mocked at. They said, what are you going to do here? And the first drop of water fell on the 1st of Rajab. You know, Rajab we call a month of rahmah from Allah. So it's 1st of Rajab. And when we say springs came out of the earth, the first water that came out of the earth was from Amura's oven. So he built this ark with 90 compartments. We've got all how big it was and all the rest of it. But his 2nd wife, Rabia, she refused. And so did his son Canaan, which you all know. And they get on this boat. And there's wonderful stories about how they're told, you're scared. Recite 1,000 times La ilaha illallah. So you're supposed to recite on journeys La ilaha illallah for safety. In any case, the Kaaba remains. He's told to go near the Kaaba, Kohi Abu Qubais. He takes the remains of Prophet Adam. They're with him. And then when everything settles down, they start again. They rebuilt the place. They settle in Kufa, and he's buried in Najaf. Anyway, there's a very short story of Prophet Nuh. But basically, the idea of the whole thing is that these people were really arrogant. They mocked him. They couldn't understand a divine guidance, although they recognized that this was not something from a human being. Then he gives the example, another historical example of Ad. So let's look at what he says. He says, كذبت عاد فكيف كان عذابي والنذر. So Ad, the people of Ad, they belied their prophethood as well. How was my punishment and warning? Remember, this comes very many times. فكيف كان عذابي والنذر. What were they sent? إِنَّا أَرْسَلْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ رِيحًا. We sent them wind, rihan. Sarsaran is cold and relentless. So we sent them a cold wind, fi yawmin, on a day. Nahasin. Nahasin is a cursed day. And mustamir, we've seen that word before. We saw mustamir in ayah 2, continuous. There's a continuous wind. And we're told that this wind carried on for 7 nights and 8 days. I'll tell you the story in a minute. Tanzi nasa. Remember Naziyat, Surah Al-Naziyat, to pull, to pluck out. And this wind pulled human beings. كأنهم, as though they were أعجاز نخل منكئر, like they were hollowed trunks of palm trees. So it is also an indication of saying that human beings, with this wind, every bone was broken. They were hollow inside. فَكَيْفَ كَانَ, again, how was my punishment and how was my warning? And then again, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We have made the Quran easy to remember. There are warnings in here that you should take heed. فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Is there anyone who will put a little bit of effort? So let's look at Prophet Hud, right? So Ad, the name Ad is the people of Ad, right? He was the great grandson of Nuh. So there's 130 different clans and they're known as Ad, right? Iram, they lived in a city on Yemen called Iram. And Iram is a city of pillars. And you'll see Iram is a name as well. We'll talk about it in a minute. They were blessed. They had technological skills. Their physique was big. They had so much going for them. And Prophet Noah had always promised that there will be the coming of Prophet Hud, just like we have promise of Imam Zamana, Ajalallahu Faraja. But they called him a liar. They said, you, a messenger? My goodness, if God had wanted to send someone, he'd have sent an angel. And just like Prophet Noah, they beat him severely. A drought comes. They say, we'll manage. We're strong. We've got technological skills. We can do things. We don't need you to tell us to ask. Ask for forgiveness, he said, and everything will be okay. And turn back your ways. When you ask for forgiveness, you turn like your tawbah and you'll be okay. They refuse. After 7 years of the drought, some farmers in a nearby place come out and they say, you know what, I think he's right. I think we should believe him. But his wife said, well, if he was right, why would his crops burn out as well? So they listened to his wife. They went to find him and they told Hud, but this is what your wife is saying. And he said, may God give her a long life. He didn't say much at all. So they left as well. But their arrogance was there that we will not believe. It's not going to happen. Well, finally, there is a dua that he does, and he's told, you know what, you need to leave this place. So he leaves, and there's 7 nights and 8 days of a continuous wind, as we can see. And he leaves for Bakka, so which is near the Kaaba. He's buried near the Kaaba. So we find these people, the people of Ad, or the people of Prophet Hud, were extremely arrogant. In other words, they relied on their own. They were strong. They said, we can do it. We don't need God. So these are examples that are given. Now we find in section 4, Prophet Salih. So let's look at him. كَذَّبَتْ ثَمُودُ بِالنُّذُرِ. The people of Thamud rejected the warning. Okay, so now Thamud is the grandson of Iram. Remember we talked about Iram? That place, he was the grandson. Iram was the grandson of Nuh. But anyway, I'll talk about it at the end. So كَذَّبَتْ ثَمُودُ بِالنُّذُرِ. They rejected the warning as well. فَقَالُوا. They said, أَبَشَرًا مِنَّا? A person from us? واحدا, one person from us? نَتَّبِعُهُ, and you want us to do ittiba, to follow him? Inna idhal lafi dhalali wasur. If we followed him, we would be a completely lost cause. And, we would be su'r. Now, I'm going to try and explain what su'r means. Maybe I can put it as somebody who is insane. So, you want us to follow this insane guy who's trying to change our ways? A'ulki dhikr alayhi? You mean God sent a reminder on him? Min baynina, from all of us, he picked him. Khud? Bal huwa kadhabun ushir. You know what? He's a liar. And Ashir, sorry, not Ashir. Ashir is somebody who refers to animals. He's wild. He's unstable. He's not thinking right. Saya'lamuna. So you will soon know, Ghadan, tomorrow, Manil Kadhabul Ashir, who is the real liar and who is the real unstable ones. Inna mursilun naqata. We will send you a she-camel. Fitnatallahum. It'll be a difficult test for you. Fartaqibhum. Watch them. Wastabir. And have a lot of patience. Wastabir comes from sabr, but it means extreme patience. Wanabbihum. Tell them. Give them the news. Annal ma'a. That the water. Kismatum bainahum. Should be shared between them. Kullu shirbim muhtadhar. And everybody who drinks, there should be a certain amount that they drink. Now, we'll talk about this camel, how it drank all the water. فَنَادَوْا صَاحِبَهُمْ. They were told, look after the camel. But they called their companion. فَتَعَاتَى. He took out his sword. فَأَقَرْ. And he stabbed the camel in the neck. فَكَيْفَ كَانَ عَذَابِي وَالنُّذُرِ. How was my punishment and my warning? Inna arsalna alayhim. We sent to them sayhatan wahidatan, a single cry. Fakanu. And they became like kahashimi. Kahashim is like twigs. Muhtadir is when when you're building fences out of wood, and then what's left, the stuff that is left on the floor, the little bits of twigs, are known as kahashim al-muhtadir. That's what they became like. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Is there anybody who will put a little bit of effort to be able to understand the Quran? So let's look at Prophet Salih. So Thamud is the grandson of Iram, who is the grandson of Prophet Nuh. Now they were also amazing. They had technological abilities of building intricate caves in the sandstone mountains, and they had surrounded gardens of springs and gardens, in other words, Jannah on earth. Now amongst them was this young boy called Salih, and he had excellent morals. In fact, everybody in the community thought one day he will be our leader. They didn't expect him not to toe the line, but to tell them, you know what, you really need to sort yourselves out. You're really wasteful. He was married to Saduf, but she was against him. They rejected accountability, and to them wastage was no big deal. Maybe we could look at ourselves sometimes and see how much we waste. So they said, you know what, you're keeping on and on and on, and some people are believing in you. Let's have a contest. We call our gods, you call your gods. Remember Ibrahim, same sort of thing. They call their gods, and he addresses each of the idols, and he says, they're not doing anything. So they said, well, you know what, 70 of our most elite men will come. And what they tell you, if they believe you, we will believe them. So the 70 men said, you know what, we'll tell you what. Those mountains we've got there, why don't you ask your God to get a camel, a pregnant camel, whose udders are filled with milk, and she has a a burgundy coat, a dark red coat. He raises his hands, says, Ya Allah, this is what they're asking. So they all gathered near the mountain. I can imagine it felt like the mountain was going into labor. It shook, a crack, and a camel comes out. And they are just taken back. They all go quiet. They all go back home. But there's 9 of them. 9 of these people. It only takes a few who are rebellious. And one of them was called Qudar. And they say, oh my goodness, they're all going towards Salih. So Qudar, and they were told one day the camel would drink all the water, and one day you will. And the day the camel drinks water, she gave so much milk that everybody had enough milk. So they found her drinking and they were, at the wells, and Qudar stabs her or slaughters her. He butchers her completely. And the calf that she's given birth to runs away into the mountains, and they roast the meat and they're eating it. And you can imagine when Prophet Saleh comes and he sees all this and he's absolutely flabbergasted. Even then he says, the Rahman has allowed you 3 days of respite. If in these 3 days you ask for forgiveness, not only do you ask for forgiveness, but if you look after the calf, you'll be all right. You will find a sign of God in you. One day, the first day, your faces will be yellow. Second day will be red. Third day will be black. But they saw that. But they still blamed him. And they conspired to kill him. Remember the Prophet? And he was warned by divinity. He leaves in the cover of night. And he says, I really feel bad because you don't like well-wishers. And at dawn, there's an earthquake. The earth swallows their homes, flattens them to the ground, and he goes and lives in Kufa, where he rebuilds the community, and he's also buried in Najaf near Adam and Nuh. So we find these people, the people of Saleh, wasteful people. Now we come to the people of Lut. كذبت قوم لوط بالنذر. The people of Lut denied the warning. Inna arsalna alayhim hasiban. So we sent down strong winds on them. Hasiba is strong winds. Illa ala Lut, except the family of Lut. Najaynahum. We saved them bisahar, in the morning. You know, sahri we say. So it's time of Fajr, we saved them. Ni'matam min indina. This is a favor from us, a ni'mah from us. كَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي مَنْ شَكَرَ. And this is the compensation we give those who are grateful. وَلَقَدْ أَنذَرَهُمْ. And he warned them, بَطْشَةً, of what would happen to what they were doing. فَتَمَارَهُ بِالنُّذُرِ. فَتَمَارَهُ means they debated it, they talked about it, they had doubts about the warning. وَلَقَدْ رَأَى. But when they saw, وَلَقَدْ رَاوَدُوهُ عَنْ ضَيْفِهِ, when they saw his guests, now these are angels, I'll talk about it in a minute. فَتَمَسْنَا أَعْيُنِهِمْ. They wanted those guests. There were 4 angels that were very good looking men. فَتَمَسْنَا أَعْيُنِهِمْ. We blinded their eyes. فَذُوقُوا. So taste عَذَابِي وَالنُّذُرِ. Our warning and our punishment and our warning. وَلَقَدْ سَبَّحَهُمْ بُقْرَةً عَذَابٌ مُسْتَقِرٌ. And indeed, سَبَّحَهُمْ, how am I going to put this? Sabbaha, a punishment that took hold of them. So our punishment took hold of them. بُقْرَةً, in the morning. عَذَابٌ مُسْتَقِرٌ. And you remember مُسْتَقِرٌ. And it continued to hold them. فَذُوقُوا, taste. Now here, it wasn't for kaifa. Because here it's like even stronger. Allah is saying their morality dropped. So taste my punishment and my warning. وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We have made the Quran easy to remember. Is there anyone who will take a little bit of, put in a little bit of effort to be able to remember that? Now let's look at Prophet Lut. He's born in Kusa. Kusa is the same place where Prophet Ibrahim is born. So one day in Kusa, he meets his cousin who's never seen before because he was in the caves. Remember Ibrahim? And he's enamored by his cousin. Cousin's Ibrahim. So he's got a sister called Sarah, and they become his followers. Sarah marries Ibrahim, as you know. And if you look at Sura Al Ankabut, ayah 26, he says, I will emigrate with you where I can worship only Allah. So you know the incident with Ibrahim, and they move. So Ibrahim moves with Lut, Sarah, and Hajra, and they go to settle in Hebron. Now they do tabligh there because Hebron is in the middle of 4 roads, and travelers and caravans come all the time. And Ibrahim is known as the one who didn't burn in the fire of Namrud. Now one day they get news that 24 miles away there's a city called Sadum, where people have become very immoral. There's complaints about the immorality. Now I'll tell you about how this happens, okay? So he sends Lut, and Allah says in Surah Al-Anbiya, I think, Surah number 21, he says, we gave him wisdom and knowledge. Now these people in Sodom were once a very righteous community. They were farmers who they were excellent hosts. So their farming produced lots of stuff, and they were really excellent hosts. Then came a drought. In fact, travelers used to come, and they would look after all those travelers. When the drought came to them, they became stingy. They stopped giving anything to the travelers. And sometimes these travelers were so desperate that they would steal from their farms. One of them thought, and maybe inspired by Shaitan, some of their hadiths say, but anyway, he thought that, you know what, we need to teach these thieves a lesson. So what we're going to do is we will make them examples to everyone. So one of them thought, we're going to strip him. So what they did with one of the thieves was they stripped him naked, brought him into the main center of the town and said, this is what we do to thieves. Well, some of the men over there thought, well, these young people who are stealing look quite good. And they started gravitating towards them to satisfy themselves. And suddenly it just took one or two people, and it became a habit. And suddenly their morality left. They started dressing up differently as well. They would be uncovered. They became corrupt. So that thing that they tried to use as a punishment suddenly became a norm to them. And when Prophet Ibrahim sends Lut and he goes there, he is shocked. He introduces himself and says, I'm a cousin of Ibrahim. He marries somebody called Kiwab, who is from them, and they have 3 daughters. And day and night he tries to advise them. What you're doing is wrong. Stop your immorality. In a hadith we're told the heavens and the earth cried because such a righteous people had become so immoral, and the way they kidnapped the people who came in travelings now, it wasn't only exposing them when they stole, they even kidnapped them for their own gratifications. So 4 angels are sent 30 years on, Jibrail, Mikael, Raphael, and Gabriel. And Kiwab, the wife, sends a message to the townspeople, oh, we've got guests here and they're really good looking. The people of Sodom arrive. And Prophet Lut tells them at the gate, go away. These are my guests. You know what? I'll give you my daughters. Why don't you marry my daughters? He had 3 daughters. And they said, you know what we want. We don't want your daughters. And as they come towards the angels, it is said that Jibreel just lifted his fingers and they became blind, as we see in this surah. So they became blind. And these angels, Prophet Lut is amazed, and they tell him, we will deliver you and your family except for your wife. We're actually messengers from your Rabb. That's when he realizes that they're angels. So this was early Wednesday morning. They move. They're taken away in the dark of the night. And Prophet Lut is really sad. But as they're going towards Hebron, they feel the tremors in the earth. There's an explosion at sunrise. There's continuous winds. They feel the shards of the sandstorm coming with them, but the angels are protecting them. Anyway, Prophet Lut and his daughters settle in Hebron. Just so that you know, his daughters marry those who emigrated from Kutha to Hebron, and from their progeny comes Ayub and Shu'aib. So that is the people of Lut. Then we find 2 ayat in section 6 about Fir'aun and Musa. Incidentally, there's 7 signs, not 9 signs, so maybe you could correct that. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَ عَلِ فِرْعَوْنَ النُّذُرُ. And the warning came to the family and friends of Fir'aun. كَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا. They rejected our signs. كُلِّهَا, all of them. And I'll talk about them in a minute. فَأَخَذْنَاهُمْ. So we overtook them. Now here Allah says, we grabbed them. أَخْذَ عَزِيزٍ مُقْتَدِرٍ. We grabbed their power because they felt they were powerful. Fir'aun felt he was very, very powerful. So just so we know the signs, you know, when Prophet Musa and Fir'aun, this is a meeting between them. So we find when they meet, Fir'aun starts by psychologically telling him, did we not raise you? And he said, I fled because I feared you. And then, who is your Rabb? And he says, one who gave everything its existence and then guided it. So the first 2 signs, and maybe the 9 signs are 7 plus 2, but the first sign is the snake. Then you have the white hand, the hand that went under his armpit and comes out. And then the 7 signs are the drought, the hailstorms, the locusts, the beetles, the frogs, the water that changed into blood, and then the plague on the livestock. And you can see the next sign, so you have 2 and then 7, which probably make 9, but the 10th sign was the parting of the sea and the drowning of Fir'aun. Now we come to section 7. So they've got historical examples that were given to them. But now they're told, أَكُفَّارُكُمْ خَيْرٌ مِّنْ أَوْلِيَاءَكُمْ. Are these who covered up the truth better than those? You think you are better than all these? لَكُمْ بَرَاءَةٌ فِي الزُّبُرِ. Have you got an exemption letter that allows you from your scriptures, that allows you, a freedom from the punishment? Bara'atun, you all know. We have Surah Al-Bara'a. Zubur is past scriptures. So have you got something that exempts you from not being punished? Am yakuluna, or do they say, Nahanu jami'un muntasir, that we will all get together and we will avenge the messenger? Muntasir, did you see that word again? Sayuhzamul jam'u wa yuwallawna dubur. So you know what? Entire might will be done away with. Hazama is to do away with something. Wa yuwallawna dubur, and the back will be shown. And this is actually referring to Badr. Balis-sa'atu maw'iduhum. The day will come. That means the promised day will come. The real meeting is the hour. Was-sa'atu adha wa amar. And it is the bigger catastrophe. Innal mujrimina, indeed the guilty, will be fi dhalal. They will be in error. And they will be su'ur. I'm going to try and say they will be lost and crazy. They won't know where to go. Su'ur, crazy. They will have lost it. They will have lost the plot. Yawma yushabuna finnar. When they will be, sahaba is to continually push down. When they will be continually pushed down in the fire they created themselves. Dhuku, they will be told, taste massa sakar. Taste the touch, massage to touch, the touch of sakar, of this burning fire that you created yourself for others. Inna kulla shay'in khalaqnahu biqadar. We created everything according to a measure. وَمَا أَمْرُنَا. And the way we do things, Allah says, إِلَّا وَاحِدَةً. It's just one way. كَلَمْ فِي الْبَصَرِ. It's just like the blinking of an eye. So for you have to plan and put things together. When we do something, it's just a moment. We just say, كُن فَيَكُن, and it's done. وَلَقَدْ أَهْلَكْنَا أَشْيَاءَكُمْ. And we've destroyed many like you. فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Is there anybody who put a little bit of effort in understanding that generations will go after you? You're not like the only ones that are here. Don't be so arrogant. وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ فَعَلُوهُ فِي الزُّبُرِ. And everything is recorded in the previous scriptures. So everything is there. وَكُلُّ صَغِيرٍ مُقَبِيرٍ. Everything small or big is documented. Everything. And it's written bit by bit. It's very easy for us to understand that today. So this is a scary one, section 7. But now, oh my goodness, this is beautiful. Innal muttaqina. Those who protected themselves, those who are taqwa, those who are God conscious, they're in jannat, they're in gardens, wa nahar, and rivers. Fi maq'adi sidkin. They are in this place of sitting where they don't want to get up, because it's a place of truth. And with malikin muqtadir, with the most awesome, most powerful of kings. So they're in the company. In other words, they're around those who reflect divinity. Now, Ayatul Amuli was asked, where is Imam Zamana? Give us the address of Imam Zamana. And he said 5455. I think it's beautiful. Surah Al Qamar, Ayah 55. Because they said, where can we find him? So he said, you will find him in every place where there is truth and righteousness. You will find him in a place where there's no fraud and deception. And you will find him in a place where there's the remembrance and dhikr of Allah. And that's why I said 5455. So this place, you want to stay in a place which is trustworthy, which is truthful, and where there is extreme compassion. You just don't want to leave. That's why you want to stay. That's why the Farsh of Hussein is so sort of, you want to be there and you don't want to leave. And that in essence is Surah Al Qamar. Absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely love it.